The brain begins to develop very early in utero, and in fact, babies already are tuned into the voices of the people around them before they get here. So they recognize the voice of their mom or their dad or their siblings or their grandparents before they get here. And you can actually play games with the baby in the womb, but knowing that baby will now tie that experience into its experiences after it gets out of the womb makes us realize that development is even happening before they get here. Here are some of the key things we're now learning about brains. They develop more rapidly between birth and 3, really between conception and 3. So if there are pregnant mothers in this audience, what you are doing right now with your baby is influencing its brain development. Brains develop more quickly between conception and 3 than they ever will again. And they're doing it at this rate. By age 1, the brain has attained 70% of its final mass. 70% by age 1. Before they talk, before they walk, babies' brains are, for the majority of brain mass is in place. And by the time they're 3, 90% is in place. Brains develop in sort of key stages. So in the early years between birth and 3 and birth and 5 at the outside, connections in the brain called synapses are being built more quickly than they ever will again. Because later, so when you get to primary years, what you're really doing is strengthening the connections that have already been made in those early years. Then when you get to adolescence, your brain rewires on the basis of, oh, I don't use that connection very often. I can prune that off. And what the brain is really trying to do is to strengthen its connections so that you have as efficient a brain as possible. So you know how like now, if you go to wash your hands, a faucet can work in any number of ways. Sometimes you have to turn it, sometimes you have to punch a button, sometimes you just stick your hand, and it often feels confusing. That's because our brain doesn't want to actually learn all those new things. It wants to efficiently know how to turn on the tap. Right. When you are a child, you're actually set up with a brain that's really curious and wants to learn all those things. Right. What's happening between birth and 5 is that you're setting up basic pathways. It's not just genetics, it's partly genetics, but we now know that it's through experience. So the experiences that happen again and again and again are what create synaptic connections. They start to form what I call highways in the brain. So you can have a highway to joy because every time Daddy walks to the door, he cuddles me. And if every time the door opens and I get cuddled, I get a highway to joy about door opening. Or every time Daddy walks to the door, he hits me. I get a highway to anxiety. That is how brains are built. And I think when we begin to understand that, not just about babies, but about ourselves, we can begin to think, why do I feel anxious in that setting? And we can learn to calm down in new ways ourselves. So this child will start to cost us money because they'll need a special education teacher, or they'll need extra after-school play, or they'll need a speech and language therapist. So because we couldn't get help to this family, we cost ourselves money. The US ranked at the bottom of 21 rich countries. And the UK, where I have held an academic post for the last 20 years, is right at the bottom as well. So it becomes really interesting to realize that in a rich society, we actually have poor child well-being.
How do you think youth, especially teens, can really help move this forward and help make a difference in early childhood development?
You tell me. What do you think? Because in a sense, I want to throw back that question. I want all of us to ask these questions. The film is called a film conversation because it's meant to get all of us having a conversation. It's not the film doesn't end, it just opens things. You know, we mean it as an opening. So rather than me saying what I think I want all of us to be asking ourselves, what can we do? Countries like Norway has much longer maternity leave. They also have more paternity leave. They have different systems for giving birth. So the way in which mothers are supported when they're pregnant and to actually even have the baby, so labor suites. Taxation can be done in a very different way. Do we want to support childcare?
So actually, should the government be putting more in so that you have higher quality childcare, or indeed so that mothers have a choice to stay home more, or so that if it's not mothers staying home, could fathers stay? Right? We can just start, if we start to think about the whole big picture within which babies are growing, we can see lots and lots of strands about how we might do things differently. It doesn't have to cost money, though. If we realize that cuddles, that smiles, that not speaking to children in a sharp voice changes the way they feel about themselves and the way they behave, we realize this is not just about money. This is about the way we relate to one another. And then we realize it's not just about babies. It's about all of us.